Good morning, everybody, and welcome back to another edition of the Layover on the Lost In Network. We've got an exciting guest to talk with you guys today. Tom Marchant is the co-founder of Black Tomato, the award-winning luxury travel company known for designing deeply immersive, emotionally driven travel experiences around the world. He leads the brand's business development, marketing, and creative strategy, helping position Black Tomato as one of the most innovative voices in modern travel. A recognized thought leader in luxury and experiential travel, Tom serves on advisory boards for brands including Six Sense Hotels and Kerzner International, and he regularly contributes to trend forecasting on the future of travel and speaks globally at conferences and institutions such as Google and Harvard. His work has been widely featured in leading media, and he has been recognized by Condé Nast Traveler and the World Luxury Chamber of Commerce for his impact on the industry. Tom, thanks so much for coming on, man.
Thanks for having me on, Sean. It's Dylan, rather. It's really it's good to be on, actually. Hearing that recount of all that stuff we do is both humbling and slightly embarrassing, but it's nice to
Well, hey, it sounds good in a bio, right?
Yeah.
You know, I know I just wrapped off quite a bit there, but you know, a lot of our travel audience is interested in kind of how people got into the industry. Do you want to maybe take us back a little bit? Tell us a little bit about, you know, where'd you grow up? Where'd you go to school? What did you What did you study? You know, what was travel like for you as a young person growing up, and why did it become such a important part of your life where you wanted to spend the rest of your life giving other people those experiences?
Yeah, no, it's I'd love to. It's funny because you often reflect on, like, sometimes I'm not sure everyone does it. How did I get to here? And you look back and wonder where the moments might have been that fueled that. And I think it's a couple of reasons. I mean, I grew up in Birmingham in England, which I think has become kind of globally famous since Peaky Blinders came out. I think before that it wasn't so well known. So now when I say it, there's a reference. I don't have the accent, but I can. I certainly know the area well. But grew up in Birmingham. But my mother's from Finland, and she trained as a nurse in Finland and worked in Sweden and traveled a lot, and sort of ended up in Worcestershire, which is just south of Birmingham, on her travels, and met my father. And so growing up there, I think my mother's love of travel and just the fact that I had relatives away in Scandinavia led to sort of summers in Finland and lots of exploring around Europe. And my father's side of the family had sort of lived all over the world. So I had uncles sort of spread around the world, and my father traveled with work. So I think around the home, there was always a big interest in travel, which fueled a curiosity in myself and my brother. And growing up, I was always really eager to know what else was beyond, almost like the confines of where I live, almost like my country as well. And you know, we didn't go on crazy holidays all over the world, but it was just regular sort of summers into Southern Europe, like I say, up in Scandinavia, and summers and winter as well. And I think at a young age, I was so blown away by just the idea of meeting different cultures and different people. I think it was in those early days, without realizing it, probably the seed was planted, which has led to what I'm doing now. I then studied at university in a town in the northeast of England called Newcastle, and met my partner, my business partner, James Merritt, there. We both studied geography, which people say, oh, well, that was natural that you go into travel. But if I'm honest, we liked studying it. It was less about capitals and mountains, but more about human and socioeconomic kind of stuff in geography. But we connected over a love of sport and travel, actually, James and I did. And so every sort of spare moment we had when we were at college, we sort of worked double jobs to earn money. And then when the summers or the holidays came, we'd take off on adventures around the world, just trying to explore new places and really looking for places that weren't the obvious places. You know, a lot of people in the UK, when they turn up at university or when they leave university, would take what we call gap years, and it was often the regular travels to great places like, you know, Australia and Thailand, and we were always looking for something else. So the first trip I remember we took was to the Philippines when we were 19, and in those days, it wasn't really that well known beyond things like, you know, the Marcos regime and all this stuff. And that first trip, we spent about 3 months in the Philippines, just backpacking around it, riding motorbikes across islands, hitching rides on fishing boats, working routes to get between islands. And we just fell in love with this idea of exploring and looking and searching for feelings that we were desperate to get from travel. And to accelerate that forward, you know, James and I, both of our fathers were entrepreneurs. And so we'd grown up in households where we'd observed our our dads working hard, having the lows, but the highs, but seeing the satisfaction they got from having their own thing. And so on one of our many trips, we'd said, we wanted to do something together. We didn't know what it was, but our kind of fundamental requirement was it had to be something we were passionate about. Because we subscribe to the adage, which some people don't, which is, this idea that don't work on something you love because you'll fall out of love with it. And ours is, well, actually, ours was the opposite, which was work on something you love and then it'll never feel like a job. And also, if you like, the passion you have for it will carry you through the tougher times because you're so dialed into and so full of belief for what you do. And so it was on these travels. We're in Brazil, in the Pantanal, which is a huge area in the middle of Brazil, kind of half the size of France, but incredible diversity, swampland, jungles, lakes full of piranhas and crocodiles, swamps you walk through, you're making sure you don't kind of tread an anaconda, sleeping out in huts, with snakes in the rafters. And it was one night where we said, how do we keep doing this? The honest answer was, how do we keep doing this? Because we love it. And is there a business in this? And fast forward a little bit, we came back, we met our third business partner when we were traveling to Australia, and a guy called Matt Smith, and he was cut from a very similar cloth to us. We came back to London. We all took jobs in the corporate world, not because you weren't sure what we wanted to do, but rather we thought getting some experience, even though it wasn't necessarily directly transferable, but just the idea of working in a commercial enterprise where you get skills in terms of negotiating or meeting people would be good. So we did that for a few years. And over those 3-4 years, we shaped what was becoming Black Tomato. And it allowed us to see what our colleagues and friends and connections were thinking about with regards to travel. And actually that period just really reinforced our belief in what the proposition of Black Tomato was going to be, which was very much now we call it the experiential kind of approach. But back in those days, people didn't talk about travel that way, which is where we saw an opportunity to sort of light the fire under our kind of business dreams.
I love it. Great story. When did you guys start to think about this idea of the luxury market? Because a lot of those early days of what you're talking about is a lot of backpacking and motorbiking and staying in mud huts on the side of the river. Not what everybody would always, those experiences can be exciting and fun and transformational, but there's a luxury element that, your clientele probably expects from those experiences where they're not roughing it so much, maybe. Yeah. So when did you start thinking about the idea of experiential travel, but also curating an ecosystem of partners which could really provide that ultimate black glove service, that you get from the type of clientele that you guys are catering to?
It's a really good question, Dylan. I think ultimately it was an evolution. Like, I think our view still is that, there are many luxury takes on many different forms. And, we cater to a high net worth audience, and there are the, and I'm air quoting, the classic kind of types of luxury that people want. But the stuff we were doing in the early days, the places we were going to and finding, which were hard to access, quite unknown, gave you that unique feeling, made you feel special because you're enjoying something that few others had, or you'd had to work a bit harder. That actually started falling into quite a luxury category. It wasn't something that was easily available or everyone had. And I always talk about this time we went to Iceland as we were planning the business. And I mean, it's well known now, but in those days, there's this lake outside Reykjavik, and off the lake there's this fissure called the Sulphur Crack, and it's clear water. It's very cold, but you can basically, the clearest water in the world, like clearer than the water you'll scuba dive in the Maldives, but you can dive down down this fissure and hold one hand on the Americana plate and one hand on the Eurasian plate and sort of be holding the world apart, right? And this experience, that was only, I think, probably like 70, 80 euros. It didn't conform to this conventional luxury definition, but it was a luxury because people didn't know about it, and it gave you this unique experience. So that was an element. But then I think we always knew the market. We had a lot of, it wasn't that we came from an uber luxury background or had a whole treasure chest of capital to go out and throw at this, but we were working around people in demanding jobs who were cash rich, time poor, but who still yearn to have a sense of, to find these amazing feelings they're looking for, but do that in a way that also would throw in comfort as well, so that we don't always have people don't have the luxury of just putting a backpack on your back and taking off for 10 months as much as some people like. But it's saying, well, if I took 2 weeks off, I'd love to stay in great places so that's comfortable, but what adventures can I have around it? Or actually, I may forego spending X amount on a suite, but I'll spend that same amount getting deep into the Mongolian steppe, where I can sleep under a starlit sky that I can read by on Hessian mats, because the feeling of uniqueness is going to give me is just as special. So as we offered these types of experiences, but built relationships with incredible hotel providers and property places and partners who understood our market, so the offering, it didn't kind of evolve without us knowing it. It just moved into this space where we still allowed, encouraged people to look for experiences, but also knowing that they could do it at a level of comfort where they wouldn't be thinking, well, if I get back from that, I'm going to need another 3 weeks off work to recover.
The classic vacation from the vacation.
It's like every ski trip I take, it's always like I need another week off. But so it was, we knew the audience because we were working around them in our jobs, and we were still young, and it's I think a lot of people, when they're looking to kind of understand audiences, you don't always have to be from that world when you start, but you need to be able to understand it. And now we have thousands of high-level premium customers around the world traveling us all the time, and we really understand what makes them tick and what matters to them. But they all share a common thread, which is a level of curiosity and a desire to experience places in a way that is not the obvious. So to take the side street that others people won't, to go a bit further, into that landscape, to go to the other mountain, to pick the lake on the horizon, to wander over to that place and meet these people that you wouldn't from a guidebook. And that's been a real joy, actually, starting to kind of work with and build a fantastic community of like-minded, curious people.
I love that. So, I feel like everybody nowadays in travel, they're chasing, the trends they find on social media, right? We've found this concept of over-tourism. Yeah. Something happens, whether it's, the White Lotus effect in Bali, or, on kind of like mainstream entertainment, or you have a video that goes viral on TikTok about, Albania, for instance. Yeah. And then all of a sudden that's the hot spot. And then you show up and you got like 5 guys next to you in the water, and it's like you're like arm to arm, and there's no infrastructure. And Albania just started serving tourists in the 80s and they don't have the infrastructure. Yes. So how do you guys as premium, curators find these kind of off the beaten path, these life transformational travel opportunities that are still kind of the undiscovered, untapped, that haven't been bastardized by social media or the latest travel film?
It is fascinating, the increasing influence of not just media, but drama upon travel. I mean, we've always, actually, as a company, we've always believed that you travel often subconsciously, but as a manifestation of your other passions. And so it will be things where, you might be reading a book that's not about a place, but it's set in a place, and it just starts making you think. Or you're watching a show. I mean, there's the White Lotus effect, but you could take that all the way back to Lord of the Rings in New Zealand, right? When people start seeing, and Iceland over the years, because it's become a backdrop for everything from Game of Thrones to Interstellar. And whilst that's great for those places, and it is lovely to make that connection. So we like, even like if someone's favorite band just recorded an album out in a particular desert, so we look for these connections to bring them out. But you also do come up against certain places, the White Lotus effect. We work with all the places, we know well kind of the hordes that have run into Sicily, and it's a challenge. And because, exactly as you say, there's the reality versus almost like the fantasy. And over tourism, Iceland's a great example. I love Iceland; it's probably my favorite country in the world. But most people's pictures, it makes out that this landscape, and it's just you. There's no one else there. And you have this image of isolation, but what they do is they either use the benefits of photoshopping or stuff to get rid of the coach load of people behind you. And so it's difficult from travel side, because the way some people market travel is you're always setting people up for a fall. But we have this phrase inside the company, which is, the world may have been discovered, but it hasn't been fully explored. And what that means is there are places like Iceland, as an example, that have vast stretches of hinterlands and valleys and mountains that people just don't know about, because it might not be on the classic route, but because of our relationships there and our partners and our fixers, that's where we take people to. And so, yes, there might be a classic part of it that someone has to tick off, but we'll get you deep into that place that others don't know about. So you're getting a more genuine and more personalized experience. The same in, stretches of the Amalfi Coast. Like, people will all gravitate to a certain place, that picture, because they've seen it 1,000 times, but they're jostling with the crowds. But we're like, just come with us, walk a kilometer down this road, come into this cave, and you're going to have something for yourself. And it's not just about the capturing of the media, it's about something that feels so much more particular to you. So it's you experiencing it on your own or with fewer people there, which is a great feeling that people look for in travel. But also it makes you feel like you're getting an inside track on something. So to do that just requires a level of curiosity within our company and our team and our product developers and our partners on the ground who understand what we're looking for. And in there you can kind of create travel gold. And so it's that Switzerland's a classic case, right? So Switzerland in the summer it has so many tourists. I mean, I think it almost has more than it does in the winter. And they go to the Jungfrau and the Matterhorn, and they're stunning, but there's coach loads of people everywhere. But there are great other parts of Switzerland. Actually, it's one of our tips for this year about destinations to go to where are just not known, but only the locals know. These beautiful valleys that are like the epicenter of amazing Swiss cheese making, and hikes and places down near Ticino on the Italian border, which are just as stunning, but don't have anything like the crowds there. And so you're getting the experience you have in the other place, but so much more, with so much more meaning and less stress. So yeah, it's a challenge. And in a way, I love how cultural platforms, act as a catalyst to encourage people to travel. That's great. And we have definitely seen, we see the spikes in the destinations that the White Lotus names. I think it's just, has it just named Saint-Tropez is the next one?
Probably.
Yeah. So I always wonder how many tourist boards are just competing to.
At this point, it must be. I mean, the Four Seasons really lucked out with that partnership. Yeah,
they did. So it's a challenge, but it's an opportunity as well for us to show sort of how we think and how you can still get, really amazing experiences out of places that to some people might feel are done or can't be done in another way.
I love it. I'm a big fan of brand origin as well. Can you tell me more about why the name Black Tomato and where did that come from?
The strange name. So after university, I took a secondment at a company in London just to earn a bit of cash before I was going to go traveling. And second week in, they said, did I want to go to Moscow? Because it's a tech company. They're buying a company over there. And I was, I would just say yes to anything if it came to travel. So I said yes. And I was just going to go. I didn't speak Russian. I couldn't even read Russian, which led to some slightly hilarious journees on the Moscow Underground, because I couldn't tell what stop I was meant to be going to and end up on the other side of Moscow. But I went and I was working at this company, and what was meant to be a couple of weeks turned into about 6 months there. And I really, it's a tragedy in terms of what's happened to Russia now and that. But at the time, I was just blown away by the might of this country. Like, Moscow is so imposing but culturally and socially decadent. It was a fascinating place. And so friends would come out and visit me, and we built great relationships with people over there. And then myself and James and Matt would go to Moscow looking at it as a place that we could offer. And it was on one of those trips, we were in a restaurant. Ironically, it was a Ukrainian restaurant deep in the middle of Moscow. And it had this setup where, sounds very random, but you like sit around a farm. And so it was on levels, but in the middle of this restaurant was like a sort of farm bit where they had goats and sheep and chickens wandering around. I mean, it wasn't quite, it wasn't a kind of pick your dinner, but it was this rustic place. Anyway, on the menu in there was a black tomato, and we didn't know what that was. Asked the waiter, what is that? and he gave a very passionate speech about it being this rare form of tomato, but when you taste it, it's an incredible experience. And it just sort of stuck in our head. So when we were thinking about what we were going to call the company, we decided we wanted to be the black tomato of travel, so offering these rare quality experiences.
I love it.
So yeah, that's where it came from. And also, the company was bootstrapped. We've still to this day never taken investment. And in those days, still to say we wanted to, provoke, at least establish some intrigue. I mean, you could argue against it because it definitely doesn't say what we offer, but it at least kind of captured people's attention and they wanted to know more. And then once we had them looking at the site and talking to us, it allowed us to sort of sell them in on how we think about travel.
How was the tomato?
Yeah, this is the bit where I meant to say, look, it was good. I mean, if I turn around and said it's terrible, I never have one again. It would be slightly brand down. But no, it was great. And it's funny, subsequently over the years, they black tomatoes pop up like in places like the supermarket did a run on them, I think, for Valentine's Day a couple of years ago because they decided it was an aphrodisiac. And I always get random things from people around the world going, oh, I've seen this. But yeah, it was good. It was good.
I love it. So you guys were early, like very early to this, new travel trend of transformational travel or the transformation economy. Essentially, the modern traveler wants the eat, pray, love experience of Julia Roberts. They want to go on a trip and come back transformed in some way. They want to feel like they're a new person because they've had a cultural experience or they've seen something that is, that they never expected to see. Yeah. They feel like they've been transformed by giving back to a local community. They may have taken some psychedelics in a hut somewhere. Why do you think this trend of transformational travel is so in vogue right now? And what are people looking for? And how do you deliver it in a way that is authentic? And I hate that as a buzzword, yeah, but it has to be used in certain contexts. Like, I'll give an example. Like you talked about Philippines, and I spent 8 days in the Philippines for the first time over the holiday, and one of my colleagues was like, all right, we're going to this place and we're going to swim with the whale sharks. And I'm like, oh, that's so cool. You've seen all those pictures on social media. Yeah. And then you get there and it's literally like industrial whale sharks swimming. Like, it's like there's 20 boats out with 50 people and you've got guys that are chumming the water. Yeah. And I'm like, this can't be good for the whales. They're never going to eat anything naturally ever again. But the photos make it look like you're out there diving with whale sharks in the real world, or in the wild somewhere. So how do you keep transformation transformative and not create a commodity out of it?
Yeah, Trade Descriptions Act and all that. Look, I think in terms of why this word transformation and travel are being used so sort of side by side, it's a combination of reasons. I think partly it's almost factors outside of the travel industry itself. I think just, the general population in the last 10 years has just started taking far more interest about their personal well-being. By that, I don't just mean health, I mean mental and, whether it's at home, or reading or just through their curiosities. So there's a collective growing focus on how to feel better, be better. If we could get into Maslow's hierarchy of needs, but everyone's sort of, well, how do I progress? And I think there's much more of it's an okay, open conversation to have. I think I say that as a Brit. I lived in the States for 6-7 years and I love it. It's my second home. And it's always easy to have those conversations over there. I think the Brits are catching up now. And actually, it's just great that people can talk about, it's okay to talk about wanting to do better or feel better, or that you might have issues or that you want to work on, and are looking for means and answers that can help you transform or progress or develop. So I think firstly, there's a societal and cultural drive that's allowing that. And then I think people have just started realizing that travel in itself is, it's something I've always thought of, but perhaps people are seeing it differently. Has always been this incredible vehicle to allow and facilitate for absolutely mind-blowing moments that leave an impact on you, not just in that moment when you're there, but long after, that can actually sort of transform a way of thinking or feeling or how you behave. And I think on that note, we've if you look back at travel, was probably for a while, it was very much in a box, and it would be like, well, it's my vacation's coming up, I've got this many days off work, I'm gonna go away and I'll lie on a beach because I think it's about relaxing, and that's what lying on a beach does, and I'm busy at work. And you just sort of go through the motions. And then suddenly, as the world's opened up through, more people traveling, but more people being able to discover it through media, through podcasts, through everything being shared. So suddenly people's ability to say, well, actually there are different types of travel that I can actually, meet a feeling I'm pursuing, or meet or provide answers to questions I have. I mean, there's a great example here, which is a service we launched 5 or 6 years ago called Bring It Back. And this it was a personal thing for me, where I've always seen travel as a great vehicle to answer questions that I might have at home, but I never get the time to, no one has the time to answer them. And questions maybe about some of the fundamental building blocks of human life, right? So, and what we were looking at was the fact that if there are amazing communities or cultures around the world who might have a different take on a certain aspect, so it might be their approach to relationships or family or health or love or commerce, and there might be kind of blockages you got at home, you don't have time to work out how to think about this, it's overwhelming. And you say, well, actually go and spend time in these communities where they have this really beautiful take on this key human building block, and see how that makes you feel, and bring that back home, and pay that into your daily life, and see how that can work. And so we launched it, and it was like spending time in communities in Bhutan who have this really beautiful take on family, on happiness. Nomadic tribes in Mongolia, where the role of family is so sacred, and how they engage with each other. Working with entrepreneurs out in Iceland who have this really refreshing take on it. So it was just introducing people to these and showing how actually by traveling it can start transforming you. And that's been a real, and at the time it was, I hate things like ahead of its time, but it was, and I'd actually really gone deep on Maslow's hierarchy of needs for that, because I was looking at like, how do you get to self-actualization where, you don't need validation from anyone else, you just feel good. Well, you're trying to absorb all the things around you that you can learn from, and you get to that point. And that's what sort of drove Bring It Back that we're doing. But then it's just started increasing into so many other types of travel. But I also think, like I said earlier, I think it's because the conversation about looking for transformation is open. To your point about how do you combat the commoditization of it, and everyone's saying, I went there, I've been transformed, or rather I'm coming here to have this feeling, and I'm surrounded by, I had a similar experience 15 years ago in just outside of Cape Town, when I was going to go diving with great whites allegedly, and it was it wasn't a black tomato trip. I was checking out an operator for someone, and from what they offered to what the reality was, which was sort of 15 boats just kind of like in a big swell of hands by, just waiting for sharks, people being, seasick everywhere. And it was just, it's not that we work with marine biologists down there, if you want to do that now, which is a much better way of doing it. But yeah, so then the transformation though, the point is, it's a very personal thing. So our approach to the company when we're dealing with clients is always to dig into what are their motivations, like what are you looking for, like what matters to you, and actually ask questions that sometimes people just aren't asking of themselves, because it hasn't been a conventional way about thinking about travel. Again, goes back to my earlier point, people put travel in a certain box, going, if I've got time off, I guess I've got to go and do that, or I'll do that because that's what I've always done, or I assume that's going to be great. But by us kind of asking questions and pulling on a few threads, we start getting people really reflecting on what they really want to get from this trip and what feelings they're really looking for. Like, we started the company, one of the main, philosophies we started Black Tomato was, you might not know, where you want to go, but you know how you want to feel. And so we get a lot of people getting in touch, as we still do, and that's a real kind of North Star for us, that outlook, because you get people coming to us saying, look, I don't know where, I've got this time off, this sort of budget, but I know that I'm looking for a sense of isolation, or I want to be in awe of nature, or I want to be overwhelmed by a different culture, or I want to be challenged by putting myself out of my comfort zone. And then we start talking, and then it's about connecting them to that feeling, and then maybe looking for a more kind of curated trip. There's different feelings they'll feel. And so the transformation then becomes a very personal thing, without saying, oh, if I replicate that Julia Roberts trip, I shall be transformed. It's more like, that might work for someone, but there'll be, transformation is a multifaceted thing, I think. And it's just helping people to work out what that means to them.
I love it. You guys are like travel therapists or something.
Yeah, like that. Yeah, that often comes up.
So, I've heard you reference fixers a few times. What is a fixer and how does that work?
Yeah, so these are our partners on the ground. So these are, outfits, little companies, individuals who we have built up a network of absolutely crucial relationships. They're an extension of the Black Tomato family, and so we have, over the 20 years we've been running, and even before that, we spent all our time going out and building these relationships with these people who are our guys on the ground. They're part of our team. And all of our travel experts at Black Tomato, they've all lived and traveled extensively in these places, but they're not always going to be going on a trip with you. So we have our teams on the ground who pull that together. But the crucial thing there is that shared set of values between us and our fixers. So there's lots of people around the world, you can go to, and lots of people say, I can do this, I can do that. And there's lots of good people, but for the types of clients you have, who, like to my earlier point, are a very curious bunch, you need to work with people who really understand those demands, understands the level of needs that our customers have, but also are so dialed into our goals, which is about finding the alternatives, finding experiences that connect to emotional outcomes. And that's one of the sources of great pride. The purpose of Black Tomato, our purpose is to inspire people through remarkable travel experiences. And when we talk about people in that phrase, it applies to two types of people. One is our clients, one inspired, but the other people within that are the communities and the partners and fixers that we work with, because there is an absolute huge benefit that travel brings to other places by encouraging people to visit, to learn, bring in sometimes much needed revenues, and done in a sensitive way, everyone's benefiting. So yeah, it's these fixers, these partners are everything to us, and we built the business with these guys.
Very smart. Yeah, it's great to know that you've got these local folks that are boots on the ground, so to speak, who can kind of step in and make sure that
they are there, and they are a joy. To go back to James and I saying, how do we keep doing this, keep traveling? The joy I take now, knowing that sort of pretty much everywhere around the world, I've got friends who are there, where I go, and they look after clients of ours, and when I go there with my family, it's a massive joy.
I love it. So let's talk a little bit about family travel. You and I are both fathers of young daughters.
Yes.
I'm always thinking about you're always juggling different people's priorities, right? Like the 10 and 12-year-old, the Generation Alpha is actually called the Chief Influence Officer now, because they're connected, they're on the phone, they are seeing things, they have opinions. A lot of family decisions, if not influenced, are outright being driven by this Generation Alpha. But then the parents have needs, and then you've got kids, and people want to do different things. So how do you think about that idea of family travel? And I'd be curious to your own experience as a parent. How has that shaped the way that you guys design trips for families that have lots of different ideas of what makes a great trip fun?
Yeah, I mean, family travel is such a core market for us. It's a real center of gravity. We love it because we also recognize the challenge that comes with it, but also that when you get it right, the collective experiences that families have, where everyone is happy and feeling fulfilled, is so worthwhile. And I think, the Chief Influence Officer is a really good point. We're seeing in a great way increasingly, like the influence of children taking on a much deeper sort of factor when it comes to planning the travel, and that's great for us, because we want to hear from that. We want them to feed into that, and actually parents are listening. I think the idea that if when you're pulling a trip together, it's only based around one person's desire of what they think is going to be good, you can pretty much guarantee that whilst one person's having a good time, a lot of the other people won't be having a good time. And so what we do is we really go deep into it. The families about, again, like I talked about earlier, understanding motivations, but understanding also like what's the day-to-day life they have at home. What are the interests? What are the things you dislike? There's the whole logistics side that we'll both know. I know, traveling with kids, you got to get that right. That's got to be seamless. So if you see some companies that come along and say, we're the family travel guys, and they push out loads of amazing adventures and crazy stuff. And you're thinking, okay, but you want to know, like, will the transfer have a car seat in for that kid? Like, will the transfer be too long? Will they have snacks in there? Like, is the jet lag going to affect them? And I mean, many, many years ago, there was a company in the UK who launched a family travel offering. And I remember they sent away a journalist on a big press trip, and the journalist came back, and it was, she'd taken her kid away, and it's something like Vietnam, and it was hiking. And she said, it was a fairly balanced review, but she said, for all that, the most excited her kid was when they got home, they were driving back from Heathrow, and they saw a cow, in a field. And they said, so for all that, so it's kind of understanding what matters. So for us, it's, we're seeing a lot more now that is a shift from what used to be, I'd say 10 years ago, when you looked at some family travel, it would be like parents like, well, we'll go to this place. We need stuff for the parents, stuff for the kids over there. Kids might enjoy it, might not, but, we'll come together a bit, but that's it. We're now seeing a big shift into this kind of like family, connectivity, doing things together, like going and like starting a new hobby or passion where they can all kind of enjoy it. So like we're getting seeing families like all going to learn to surf together, right? Or they might be going on an art curation trip of northern Spain, amazing galleries and food in there, where they're at an age where kids get into food more. So we're just finding common threads which they can all enjoy. And so again, that's understanding the family dynamic. We did, I remember I organized as mother-in-law a trip to Iceland for her birthday, and there were like 20 of us, and that went from people 85 to like 2-year-olds. And you'd think, right, this is going to be tough. But when you know a place and you know the range of things that can be done that can meet the needs of all these people and how you can balance it in between, you end up creating these series of magical experiences. Yes, for certain individuals, certain times, but certain experiences they all enjoy together that then get talked about forever and ever and ever. And that kind of them all being in that moment is key. So we really into it. And that's, as a father of 2 daughters, that's gives me the most satisfaction. I mean, just on that thread, one thing I'll tell you that we did talking about group travels, sort of relates to families, is we've seen since COVID, a lot of these kind of reunions, multi-gen trips, people coming together, and it's often been someone organizing it. And what goes from being like, this is going to be a great trip for everyone together, quickly goes from, after 3 days, like everyone who sort of was going to be love seeing each other, it's like a really painful Christmas where everyone just kind of hates each other, right? Because often it's one person organizing it all, and you're all being taken around on buses, and some people don't want to do that. So we launched a couple of years ago a service called See You in the Moment, and it's our take on how to do private group travel, but in a slightly different way. So the idea is we have 5 different categories. So one's about a challenge, one's about a meal, one's about a journey, a celebration, loads of different experiences that are all about coming together for a moment in time. But what we say is, this is the moment in time. So it might be watching the Palio in Siena from a private balcony over there. We're all come together to watch. It might be mountain biking down the side of Mount Kenya, which you all do together. But in the build up to that, you can all travel or go to places as you want to do differently. So someone might be, if you're in Italy, might be really into the food. So we'll organize food stuff for them. So they're all having their own thing, but then they come together for this moment. So they're enjoying that thing together without any of the pain of like, I had to do all that group travel together and I now hate my second move cousin because, they sat on top of me on something. And that's been really special because it's allowed us to create absolutely mind-blowing moments for groups of people all over the world, from like, long lunches in the fjords of Norway where they've sailed up in boats and caught fish, to doing a pilgrimage in Japan where groups come together, but around that they've gone off and done their own travels in Japan. We've organized it all for them, so they had their individual experience, but really focused on that shared collective experience in the moment, being present, which is a really big thing for us this year. We're calling 2026 the year of being fully here. So I think that's an important thing, and I think we need to sort of slow down and take some time. So yeah, I could probably talk for hours on family travel, but it's like I say, it's our morning, noon, and night for a lot of the company. So it's a great area to work on.
I love it. When you're advising brands like Sixth Sense and Kerzner, what are some of the gaps that you see that hotels think the travelers want and what they actually deliver?
Yeah, that's a really good question. I mean, I'm not saying this because I have the privilege of being on the advisory boards of these companies, but the reason I am involved is because I love the way they think. What they see and what is about really it's true of any form of hospitality, but really kind of understanding what matters to the consumer rather than what they think plays well in terms of outward facing, what's been done historically. And I think so much of that when it comes to properties or hotel groups is in the people that are in these places in terms of staff and the people working there. There's that famous expression in hospitality about restaurants, like you don't often remember the food, but you never forget the people. And I think that is true. Any great hotel I stay at that I can ever think of, the thing I remember is how the people there made me feel, right? And those brands get it, like Sixth Sense, because you go and stay in any one of them, they take such interest in kind of connection, not overwhelming you, but just how you feel welcomed. And yes, we can go and stay in some stunning hotels, and they are stunning. But if you might walk into an amazing room or walk out into a beautiful courtyard or by a pool, but the moment you engage with someone from there who just leaves you flat or doesn't seem like they care, all that other stuff can fade away. Yeah, and it's just true. I mean, I spent in the summer. I was at the Six Senses in Douro Valley in Portugal, and it's a beautiful property, like in the the region where all the port comes from. And the thing that I remember most was the way the people welcomed me in, and my daughters still talk about the people there. It was like you were friends. And so I think the hotels getting it right are the ones that leave you with a feeling of being not just welcomed but settled. I think a bad hotel stay is one where you don't ever feel quite relaxed. And I don't mean if you got to feel like home, because a good friend of mine, James Lohan, who founded Mr. and Mrs. Smith, says, like, why'd you go to a hotel to make it feel like home? Just stay at home. It's so true, right? It's not about, we'll make you feel like home. It's actually about making you feel relaxed and comfortable, but in a different place, right? And that by being relaxed and comfortable in a different place, it opens your mind, you can get inspiration. But so much of that is rooted in the people and gimmicks. You could have the most incredibly developed technology, all the bells and whistles. But if it doesn't make you feel thought of, and it's a big part for me, like luxury is about thoughtfulness. If you don't feel that you've been thought of, and there's a genuine care, I think for me personally, that fades away. So I think that's what companies like Six Senses and the brands like One and Only and by Kerzner and even like Syra, the new health brand for Kerzner, which is amazing, like health and well-being. But again, it's the people that have to actually pull you into that and make you feel settled. So yeah, I'm a big our world, the travel hospitality service. It's at its heart, it's human driven, and I think it'll always be that way.
Yeah, I love that. I stayed at the Zebra in Tulum not too long ago.
Yeah.
And I got an opportunity with my family to make salsa with the head chef of the restaurant, make mojitos from grinding the sugar cane through the old grind, which is the last thing that survived when the hotel burnt down at a particular period. So not only did I get to hear about all the food ingredients of the region and how that's important to the local culture, but I got to hear about the history of the hotel, and I got to hear it from the executive chef. And then by having that experience, then we moved all of our salsa to a table, and then they brought out our dinner. And I must have told that story either 100 times at this point, either on this podcast, from a stage somewhere around the world, or just one-to-one to a friend.
And you see, like you say, but see that impact, right, that has on you, right? And that is, I'm sure that's not a kind of dreamt up, corporate driven. It's just something because they're passionate about it. I mean, it's a similar thing. I was staying at a hotel in Paris, very nice hotel, a beautiful hotel, and very well known. And one morning when my daughter's, was trying to attack the pastry table, and the waiter came over and said to my daughter, "Would you like to come and see where the croissants pastries are made?" And they were like, "Yeah." And so they walked them off into the kitchen, into this incredible kitchen full of all these chefs. These chefs all lit up, and it wasn't for the staff. And they sort of pulled them around and making them croissants, and they still talk about it. I mean, they're desperate to go back, and I don't think I have the budget always to go back. So I'm like, but it was that like, just like, the salsa was basic, but those sorts of things, they're very hard to you can't commodify those. And it has to come from a deep innate belief about the power of sharing passions from human to human. And you can see how much that meant to you. And it's a great story. So long may that continue with the people who are getting it right.
Love it. All right. So AI is trying to transform travel at a rapid rate. We have the idea that we are going to be able to speak to an AI agent, and then suddenly our itinerary and our bookings and our flights and everything will be set up for us and life will be perfect. I think a lot of people are actually having a whipsaw back to, human and in person and real because of AI, when you can't trust your eyes when you go on social media and you're like, is that real? Is that AI? I know 17-year-olds right now that don't have any social media apps on their phone. So there is kind of this return to the human in a world where AI is trying to rapidly change the travel industry. How important is that role of humans, especially in luxury?
Yeah, I mean, it is. I mean, I've touched upon it already in the conversation. It is everything. I think. Look, also, like I think there is a really great role for AI within luxury to that goes side by side with the very best of human talents. We have a phrase we use internally called humate, which is about taking the very best of the human side, which is irreplaceable, you can't replicate, but allowing that to thrive and blossom by supporting it with great technology that can allow people to get rid of some of the mundane or the banal parts of their job or the tasks, to free them up to be and bring that human magic that will never be replaced. We benefit from the fact that we're at the end of luxury, which is very bespoke. It's about access. It's about relationships, about crafting experience and delivering those experiences, which AI can never do that. And even if the AI said you should go here, it's not going to have the relationship with the guy that owns the record store down that side street in Sao Paulo that's going to take you to these. It's just these different things. And on the back end of our company, in terms of streamlining process, ability to pull information that we've got in different parts together, freeing up time for our humans to work on the real magic of building connection with the consumer, the clients, establishing that trust. And you're right, we've been tracking AI for a long time. Like I said, it's in the back end of our company, but it's about using the best of that to amplify and celebrate the best of our humans. And so we're seeing that as well. Like, AI allows people to challenge everything, but when you challenge everything, it also creates uncertainty, right? And when it comes to your vacations or getting it right, and like I say, the stuff we do, you couldn't really do through AI anyway. You might think you get inspiration, but it won't have been tried and tested. You won't have kind of gone to the lengths we've gone, or also, like I say, have the access to the creativity. But if someone tries to do a big thing themselves, or book something in, and again, the AI, yes, it might know your background, but it hasn't looked you in the eyes and really understood that. It's a risky take. And what we've seen is people will go onto ChatGPT and might pull together ideas and then come to us and say, "Can you do that?" And we're like, "Yeah, but have you actually thought about this or that?" And luckily, ChatGPT seems to like Black Tomato, so often returns us as a kind of an organization to use. And I hope that will continue. But it's not putting your head in the sand and saying, "Oh, don't want to use it. It's not going to touch us." The world. Yeah, it's an AI world we're living in. We'll continue to live in, but it's about finding our place and our value proposition in it. And I think the snapback, we're seeing that as well. You're seeing like the ban on social media in Australia for under 16s. They're petitioning for it in the UK as well. And I think I've got, extended family members of that age as well who are sort of just taking time off it. It comes back to also the transformation and the wellness and stuff. There's more and more stuff about taking time out from it. And actually, yeah, I'm not sure I can share this story. I can share this story, but I was at a conference sometime last year, and it was talking about kind of the future of travel. And there were some people from some tech companies there who were talking about, well, it's great because you can go to this place and you can pull out your phone and everything you can look through is augmented reality and it'll tell you everything there. You can also set up an AI friend on your phone and create a personality of, you can say, hey, I want you to be a French, barman who works in the Ray and likes wine, and they'll just chat with you and like walk around with a friend. And I say, look, I've got to say, look, I love technology, but this is just ripping the soul out of what travel should be. And I said, if it got to a point where I or my daughters were going away on their own and saying, it's fine, I'll just look at everything through my handheld and I'm not going to talk to a person, then, I give up. Because I'm not saying everyone has to talk to people, but one of the prerequisites or historically about travel was you travel because you go to open your mind, engage with cultures, learn from people, have experiences that will scare you, inspire you and stuff. And the idea of just walking around cities or landscapes, just looking at this, it's suddenly so luckily I don't think, look, some people will like that. Our customer base and types of people we talk to, that's not for them. And I'll work very hard to keep encouraging that. And stuff like Lostin's doing as well is exactly that, right? So it's
no, we're second city, we're point of view. When you can't trust your eyes because of AI, and every influencer out there can make a Motel 6 look like a Four Seasons because they're so good at camera work. You can't trust photos, you can't trust videos, but you can trust voices you trust. So so whether it's a company like you guys that has a 17-year track record, or a company like us that has a 10-year editorial point of view, and people who collect our guides and put them on their table as things to show their friends, like people are looking for trusted voices, whether that's on the services side or the media side, I think.
No, I definitely agree. And look, one of the things, again, when we're starting out, if you said, well, who are we as a company? We often said we want to be the best friend that some of us have or in those places around the world that you can call up, and it's this trusted friend, right? That you trust them, like, for that recommendation because they know it, because so it's you're approachable, you understand each other, but you're informed. And it's that trust that comes from great humans, great editorial that has, been in there, it's turned over the stones, it's looked for things that, people are yearning for. And I'm reading a lot, like I'm sure you are, about this reaction. I often think about, my daughters are 7 and 5, and I wonder, AI is obviously going to be a huge part of their world, but I wonder in what capacity, as they get older, will it, do we get to a level where it's a brilliant enabler for lots of things? It should enable their creativity so they can actually think about things, because other things can be done. Like, there's a big trend for us this year is what we call the gift of boredom. So, it's really important. I'm not sure if you've read it, like The Anxious Generation, right? And that book by Jonathan Haidt. And there's this idea about, getting kids off screens, but actually remembering that something that we may now, or children or parents might think is conventionally boring because you don't have a screen to look at. If you go back 10 years, 15 years, if I was turning up to meet someone for a coffee and I was early, I was okay, like, just to sit on my own. Like, now you think, if I don't, I'm jonesing for my phone that I don't have. But actually, when you're sat with those thoughts, that's where ideas come and percolate. And so we're saying, like, kids and parents, go away without the screen and put yourself in environments where you can just look and observe. And at a child's level, it's so good for, like, brain development, to encourage, like, creativity and imagination, so they're not being zoned out just by scrolling. For adults, we're all overwhelmed day to day by the constant connectivity and always being on and always having to, like, respond and living in a sea of ephemeral moments. When you go away, go and get bored and see the magic that will happen. So and again, goes back to being present. So yeah, we're launching a campaign soon, which is basically called "This Is Boring," hoping that will resonate.
I think it will. when I'm traveling and I need to leave my phone in the hotel, at least for an afternoon to charge. Or even sometimes, if we're like, oh, my phone's kind of low on batteries right now, we're going on this tour for a couple of hours, I'm just going to leave my phone. And yeah, like there's a part of me, especially as a travel media person, that's like, oh, I'm not capturing the moment on film, but maybe my wife is, or one of my daughters are. We don't all need to be on at the same time, but or even little moments like what you were talking about, like showing up to a coffee shop. Like if my phone isn't charged, I'll leave it in the car to charge, and then I'll walk in 15 minutes early, and I'll have to sit there for 15 minutes and look at people or read the newspaper, whatever it is, while I wait for my appointment to show up. And it's actually that, there was a period of time where I was actually leaving my phone in my office on Sundays, and that was radical, and it didn't last long. But
I've been down a couple of those. I did for a while last year, where in the morning I dropped like my eldest daughter at school, and I'd come back. There's a little cafe near my house, and I would leave my stuff at home, go down and just buy a newspaper and for 15 minutes, just read. And although it was consumer based, it was just that you take more time, you think a bit about more. And because it's like there wasn't something that I can go and grab, I'm not sort of just skimming through, and I actually just lent into it more. So trying to get a few of those things into your daily life, I find has been good. But I think like travel is a great vehicle for, again, like I remember talking to a very good friend of mine who's a guide in Iceland, and he wasn't our clients, but it was someone else who we were looking after, and they had a family trip, and the great thing about Iceland, you take these super jeeps, and although it's a big country, move around, but one of the joys of moving around Iceland in super jeeps is you're going through these landscapes that blow your mind. So it's not like, oh, it's a transfer. It's like kind of off-roading over glaciers and hinterlands and across rivers, but on the way somewhere. But for the whole journeys, there were like these 3 children who were just on their iPads the whole time. And he sort of said to the mom, he's like, do they want? And she's like, oh, no, I don't want to have to deal with them. But it's like they are driving through God's own country, like one of the most magnificent landscapes on earth. And he said, I honestly reckon they probably saw 20% of what they went through. And look, each their own. It sounds like I'm judging. I'm not. Everyone's on their own journey managing kids. Like, trust me, it's like, I'm definitely being that person in the busy pub when kids are having a meltdown. You're like, oh, I don't want to do it. And I always just look at this. But if there's an effort, and particularly when you're traveling, to say, look, eyes up, put that away. At the end of each day, there's that thing there's that book by the psychologist Fred Bryant, which talks about savoring, about how to really be in a moment and enjoy that moment. And he says it's like our life is all about, we're raised basically almost into this world of anxiety because we're told don't do this because something bad will happen, or don't do that. And no one, it's a brilliant thing. He says, no one when you're young as a kid ever comes up to you and says, really enjoy that ice cream. God, just love it. Dig in. It's always about don't do that. And he has this thing where at the end of every day, he'll say to his kids, like, what was the best thing that happened to you today? When they're traveling. I tried doing it at home when they're knackered after school. They're just like, go away, daddy. But yeah, not now. But when we travel, at the end of each day, we're like, okay, what have you loved today? And it's just amazing seeing their eyes light up and go, oh, did this. And it's sort of just planting those and reminding them, and that's what I see my kids. They just, they remember these things, especially, but also because you're trying to kind of get them to, without forcing it, young brains, but kind of recognize it. So it's, hopefully that we'll do more of that this year.
I love it. So you've traveled extensively throughout your career and life. Is there a place that you've been that you would recommend to the Lost In audience to go explore that comes to mind quickly?
Yeah, you could probably tell from this conversation, Iceland is nice. I must have been 20, 25 times. It's like my second home. And every time I go back, there's more to fall in love with. It's brilliant any time of the year, from the dark winters to the endless summer nights. The people are amazing. The art, music, food, the landscapes. It's everything. It's romantic. It's great for fun. It's a joyous place. And I feel very, very lucky that I get to go there often. And when I lived in New York, my now wife, she was living in London, and we'd often meet.
I love that. I love that.
But I mean, look, I'm very lucky in the job I have that I get to see a lot of places, and there's lots of other places that I absolutely adore. But if I could only have one, like perennially, it'd be Iceland.
I love it. Where is on your list of places to check out this year? Where do you want to go next?
Where do I want to go? I want to go. I'm not sure if I'll be able to get there, but there's amazing. I met a guy who is Mongolian, and we do a lot in Mongolia. I've never been. I did a train route from Moscow, the Trans-Siberian Express, which went sort of across the top. I've never been in, but we do a lot out there. But I met a guy whose family are generations old from the Mongolian steppe, and there's a sacred valley they have that's 10 hours out from Ulaanbaatar, and it's wild horses and trekking, and it's sometimes you might have it as well. Sometimes you can, and it's a terrible thing to say, but you see so much stuff the whole time. You can sometimes become desensitized, and I don't mean that in a bad way. And other people, they'd be like, "Wow," and you're like, "Ah, yeah, it's cool," and I mean that, but because we're lucky to see so much. But I had this conversation with him over a coffee in London, and it's the first time in a long time, like my jaw was on the floor for the whole time, and I was like, and he ended it with like, "Look, we've got to get you out this summer." I was like, be careful what you say, because I'm definitely going to come. But yeah, that one is. I mean, I love cities, but also these, like a bit from the Iceland thing, that the great wildernesses when you're stood out there, that a tiny speck, just marveling at the expanse and might of our world. That's the stuff that stays with me.
I love it. Well, Tom, thank you so much for an epic conversation. Appreciate you sharing more about your story, your extensive travels, and the Black Tomato brand with the Lost In audience. If you could point people to learn more about what you're up to these days, where would you like to send the audience?
Please jump onto our website, blacktomato.com, and you can find us on Instagram and Black Tomato as well. Yeah, lots going on there. And Dylan, thanks so much for having me on. I really enjoyed the conversation, and it's been great to share some stories and hear your stories as well.
I love it. Thanks, buddy. And for those of you who are watching at home, if this is the first time you're seeing the show, don't forget to give us a subscribe. An honest review on whatever podcast platform you might be listening is how we find a bigger audience. And last but not least, if you know somebody in the world who might enjoy the travel conversation that I had with Tom today, don't forget to share the show. With that, I'll wish you a great day. Thanks, Tom. Appreciate you coming on.
Thanks, man.
Cheers. Bye-bye.